and another thing with Dave Smith, bringing it to you, seeking the truth, exposing the lies one at a time. And we were kind of talking about a whole lot of things. Where do you want to pick that up?
We usually do, Dave. Hey, we don't segue as much as we just drift.
Yeah.
No, but I think we left off with Franklin Roosevelt and some of the things that he did. And earlier I was looking at Facebook, and a gentleman that we know was telling me that Donald Trump was the greatest president. Nobody's done more for the American people than Donald Trump.
Eddie. We won't say his last name, but right. Eddie. Yeah.
Yeah. I try to keep names out of it, but there you go.
Good guy.
Does this guy not know anything about history? I mean, right? Trump has done more for people than Franklin Roosevelt. That is just absolutely insane.
Oh, yeah, just unbelievable. And that's right. One thing I would like to reiterate is when you triggered my memory about FDR, I hipped you to this documentary that I watched that was new to me. And I saw this in 2019, near the end of 2019, a documentary about how there was a plot to overthrow FDR in a military coup. Mm-hmm. So the ruling elite of our country, the banksters and the billionaires, got together and they approached who they thought was a shoo-in as the leader of their coup. But it was General Smedley Butler.
Uh-huh.
And he is a true patriot. So he would not sell out. And instead, he tried to he went along with their plan long enough to gain as much information as he could. And then he exposed the entire thing.
Wow. That's a story that's not been told enough.
The only time I've ever seen it is in this one documentary, and it should be required reading for every high school student.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm surprised it didn't make the History Channel as much, because now that you told me about it, Dave, it kind of jogged my memory. That I think I did hear something about that, but it was a long time ago, and it just wasn't one of those that. It's not one of those stories that's told over and over again. You know.
Smedley Butler should be like a George Washington in our history books, right?
Well, he should at least get a chapter. God, he doesn't even get a chapter.
Absolutely. Here's a career military guy, 30 years, I think, the most decorated Marine at the time. So nobody at his time, nobody has more decorations and medals than he did.
Wow.
And then he flipped and he's like, fucking war is a racket. He saw it. He's like, I'm going to all these different countries and I'm fighting for corporate profit that has nothing to do with American freedom and nothing to do with your average American's interest. So when they tell us we need to protect American interests, what they're talking about is Exxon, frickin' Apple, Amazon. They don't give a fuck about your interests, Tony, about my interests, about protecting the sovereignty of our country and even democracy, right? And this is the travesty, is that we'll go so far as to subvert a democracy and put a dictatorship in place if it's favorable to American businesses.
Criminal.
It's criminal. And what gets me, Tony, is this, and this has been proven out through many, many countries throughout Central and South America. And let's look at Iraq even. So we knew they had oil, but they had like 3 times more oil than we thought. We found a whole oil field that nobody knew existed. And it was massive, right? And their oil got privatized for the first time since the 70s. And Iraq was making on its own oil 25 cents on the dollar. So corporations were making 75 cents on the dollar. Iraq's getting 25 cents for their own fucking oil. How did the American people benefit from that? All these companies got rich, Halliburton, all these security companies, Boeing, the military industrial complex, every little avenue of it. And then the oil companies themselves, the distribution companies. You look at the downstream network of everybody that made money from that, right? But the American people fucking paid for it. So my question to you, I'm going to wrap this in a second. How do we get duped into support our troops when our troops aren't protecting us? They're going and starting shit somewhere to steal something for a corporation.
Well, they're protecting interests that just not the American people's interest, or the corporation's interests.
But how do people not see that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dave. I think, you and I have talked many times about how people just come to believe something and just nothing can change their mind. And I don't know how that works, that there's some kind of, we're so easily manipulated. And, we all like to think we know, Dave. We all like to think we know when we have the answers. And once we're stuck in one train of thought, if you challenge me on that thought, you're telling me I'm wrong. And then I get defensive. You and I go through this all the time. You know what I mean? And it's hard to resist that.
Well,
And it's not that we have to agree on everything, certainly, but at least like if history shows this, maybe we should think it's real. If experts are telling us this, we should look at it and go, well, maybe this has some validity. If science and experts are telling you something, Dave, I'm not saying believe it just to believe it, but maybe it has some validity. Maybe we should take it seriously.
thank you. And I would just like to plug, I think, what may be both of our favorite documentary, Plutocracy, because I think it really all goes back to that. I really think it does. The control of information, the limiting of education, right? Because we were talking about population control and population, explosion and the rarity of or the ideology of scarcity, which is really what it is, when in reality it's just a distribution problem. But anyway, I think all of these things are manipulated and focused, and I think our attention on it is manipulated and propagandized by the ruling elite who now own all of our media, right? So that's how your Eddie and your Eddies of the world can
say the last name.
Exactly. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Yeah,
he's a good guy, but that's how these people, the Jasons, the Andrews, can believe that you're a Penko commie if you believe this. Like, wait a minute, weren't we founded on dissent and rebellion? And so back to the term conspiracy theory, we're talking about that too. Sorry, I'll give it right back to you, Tom. But I want to hear your theory on conspiracy theory, because that was stolen from us. So now it's bad to think. It's bad to want to investigate something, right? But we put these labels. It's like Penko commie, conspiracy theorist, right? Like you're right away, like you know what that person is and you discount everything they say. Let me hear you on that.
Well, I think it's only wrong, Dave, if you do that immediately without any information. If you take an opinion and you have just the basic knowledge of something and you've only heard it just a little bit and then, okay, I don't need to hear anymore, that's a problem. But if you indeed have looked and read and discussed things, for quite a long time, and over again, you're going to form an opinion. And I think that's an educated opinion. It may not be the truth, but that's an educated opinion. The problem with it that I have is, like you're saying, people want to shut you down immediately, right? Like you think this, or you're posing this question, and they're just, no way, can't be, It's like, well, you didn't even look at any information. You haven't, that's when I think that that's just absolutely ridiculous. If somebody wanted to discuss, like with our friend Eddie, like Donald Trump's the greatest president, nobody's done more for the American people than Donald Trump. It's like, well, shouldn't we actually like look into that a little bit and discuss other presidents, and maybe just for laughs, Dave, go to the experts, like historians? Maybe we should do that before we form an opinion. Now, maybe Eddie has done that. I don't know him. I haven't seen him since high school, Dave. So maybe he has. But I'm just thinking that anybody that makes that statement hasn't done that.
It's a bold statement. It's a really bold statement, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, FDR, Dave, through his administration, when we were in, the clutches of the Great Depression, okay, and we got the 40-hour work week and anti-child labor laws, and better working conditions. And instead of putting all our resources, David, and the wealthiest getting everything, he's the one that went to these big industrialists and big manufacturing companies, Dave, and said, you gotta put out the money for this new deal. Or, it's like kind of like when your mom used to say, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. I mean,
Right.
some historians will tell you, Dave, that FDR, with some of those socialistic programs, saved capitalism from itself.
You know how I heard it best
You want to
described,
say,
Tony, is
you
that
want to
he
say Donald
is,
Trump is a better president? It's just ridiculous.
yeah, you know how I heard it described is that FDR described to the banksters and the elite, if you don't do this now, you're going to be dealing with pitchforks.
Yes, he scared them, and they were right to be scared, Dave.
And he was correct.
Mm-hmm.
What we lack now is just that leadership, right?
Right now, I think we're looking at a major void of leadership, Dave. I mean, there's no national consensus, national plan on how we should deal with this. And God, I still understand that the testing, we're still way behind in the testing.
I'm not
How
even
could that be?
I'm not even just talking about the pandemic. I'm talking about calling out corporate America. Like the working class is being buried, like in income inequality, the worst since the Gilded Age. And the Gilded Age sounds nice, but that's like the height of income inequality when the rich were the richest and there were shanty towns in every inner city throughout America. We're
Yeah.
third world conditions in our inner cities.
When the graph on this, Dave, to show you the numbers, the graph looks like a suspension bridge, like the Golden Gate. You have the two peaks, and then the beige or swing down, and the two peaks, it's like, oh yeah, the Gilded Age. And then also in the 1920s, and then you have now, where income inequality is like, oh my God, only a few people control all the wealth. How how did we get here? Why
10,
are we okay?
10% have 90% of the wealth.
I've heard all sorts of numbers, Dave. Yours sounds, pretty accurate.
Redacted tonight did a great one on it. And once again, what I love about Lee Camp is that he references somebody's article, has an expert on. So he's not just pulling shit out of his ass, right? And I forget the exact numbers. I'll look up the episode and put the link in the description of the podcast. But I'm paraphrasing, I'm going off memory, but what I believe he said that there were like 384 people in the United States that had as much wealth as like 300 million or something like that.
Wow.
So, and then it was hilarious. He's like, I think we could take them. I say 100 million go for the throat and 200 million go for the knees. Right?
Those numbers are just crazy. They're mind-boggling.
But it blows it out of the water. Like, I'm sorry, but no gated community could keep 100 million people back. You know?
Yeah, but it would be nice to think that we could get to a point, Dave, where we wouldn't have to do that, where we could do it legislatively.
I agree. I agree.
That would be really great.
I agree.
Remember, once there is an overthrow, Dave, it doesn't always go well, and it doesn't always help the people for which it's supposed to be helping.
Most times,
French Revolution comes to mind.
Most times it goes hardcore authoritarian, so it backfires.
Yes, it absolutely does.
Right. But
the American Revolution is actually, an outlier in terms of popular overthrows and government coups.
Yeah, and a popular gain from the end result. Exactly. And not slipping into total chaos.
Right. And obviously, not that the American Revolution was perfect. I mean, it had a lot of its flaws too. Took a couple of 100 years to work them out, and we haven't worked them all out yet. So,
I've said it before. I'll say it again, Tony. I almost think our only hope to get these banksters, all these people that got bailed out in 2008, they should have been flooded out like moles in the hole, right? We should have flooded those holes and drowned them while we could. Refused any bailout and put the dagger through the heart, like we talked about in the last podcast. But, man, but we didn't. So they grew, and they're bigger and more susceptible to those same problems now, more intermingled throughout the industry. I almost think our only hope for that is a military coup with like, say, a new general, Smedley Butler, who's like, you know what? I'm going to do this, and it might look authoritarian, and it is, but for the right reasons, to restore true democracy.
Yeah, but you just hope that right person comes along.
And that they don't dupe you, and that it's not, and then you don't slip into dictatorship, right? Because it could go either way at that point.
Because Castro looked great to the average people, and certainly some good things did happen, under his regime, but they ended up another totalitarian state. Well, and most people didn't end up any better off as far as financially.
Well,
although they better education, I understand, and better healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's talk about that. I saw a great documentary. Now I'm gonna have to write this down too, because anytime I talk about this shit and reference a documentary, I want people to be able to see it. So I need to write down what I'm talking about so that I can reference it and give people the link, right? In the description of our podcast.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about what's his name?
Castro.
Thank you. So I watched this amazing documentary about Castro, and it was, it put together a bunch of shit that I haven't seen before, which was Che Guevara, who was a freedom fighter from Mexico. He went there to join the freedom fight in Castro's Cuba. And what they did revolutionized their country. So, we through sanctions, we fucked them. They didn't have gasoline. They don't have any domestic gasoline, so they couldn't drive anymore, right? So what Castro did is he put a school within 10 miles of every house and gave everybody a free bicycle. And so now the education's free, healthcare is free, and you got a free way to get to, and everybody can get to that free school. So what is the end? And this is in the 60s. No, this was in the 50s, right? As a backlash to all the.
Well, the revolution is in 59.
Right. So thank you. So it's in direct. Right away, he does this within the first year. So I think this is 59 or 60. And what is the result? Now, Cuba is exporting doctors throughout the world because they have one of the most highly educated populations in the world. Like along along the lines of like Switzerland, Cuba, like we're not even on the list. We don't export doctors. We import doctors from India, from Cuba, from China, from the Philippines, right?
Every time one of them's, interviewed on the news channels, it's Sanjay Gupta.
I like him a lot.
That. Yeah.
He actually did a great segment on marijuana, the healing aspects of marijuana. And to credit him, very open-minded man, he did a totally anti-marijuana, just spewing propaganda 10 years ago. Then he did research. He's been paying attention to the progression of research, right? And he came forward and said, I'm sorry, but what I said before was not factually true. We have new evidence now that counters what I was taught.
I like somebody who can admit when they were wrong.
Yeah.
I got to give him credit for that.
Absolutely. And he did this on mainstream media, Tony. You can see, what's his name again?
Sanjay Gupta.
Sanjay Gupta on marijuana on YouTube. And you can look it up and you'll see this clip where he starts off saying, before I got it wrong, let's look at the benefits because they're widespread and evident. And so this really went mainstream when Colorado legalized recreational marijuana, right? Because then people could start doing real legitimate medical studies because it wasn't illegal there. So they started learning so much. So, oh my God, for epileptic seizures, it's priceless. So people with kids that had epileptic seizures started moving from across the country to Colorado because they could provide their children with this medicine that they would be arrested for in the state that they used to live in. It's crazy. And meanwhile,
yeah, I think I saw something like that, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and this is the episode that Sanjay Gupta does, and he interviews a bunch of families, and he talks about their experience. It's fascinating.
Wasn't there one strain they came up with, Dave, that actually took out the elements that actually get you high and just kept the elements that are good for the particular ailment?
CBD.
Is that what it is?
Yep. Cannabinol. So, and basically, but from all the research I've done, it's the whole plant. You want the THC in there as well. There's a lot of evidence that it actually fights cancer as well. This guy, Rick Simpson, has done a bunch of research and treated a bunch of different people. And he's actually had people that were diagnosed terminal cancer. He's had their tumors disappear, shrink and disappear, and been able to show that with photographs and x-rays. They're shrinking and then eventually not detectable. And this is by eating a high concentrate of the whole plant. So, religious people would say God put it out as it should be, right? So it's almost like a religious right thing. Like, well, we'll extract this one thing from the plant, and maybe you can do that, right? Maybe there's, because that's the truth with a lot of the rainforest, right? 90% of our drugs come from 10% of the plants in the rainforest that we've only explored 10% of them. And those are the basis of 90% of our pharmaceuticals. And it is what you're just talking about. It's extracting this element out of that plant. So So I'm kind of just countering myself. Yeah, that is valid because that's what our whole medical system is based on right now. But what? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, to use this stuff is in the best way we possibly can, instead of just saying, no, this one's illegal, you can't do this, is so unbelievably stupid. I can't believe we would go years and years and years and not let this happen.
Decades.
It's like, why would we not want to study this?
Well,
what's the point of not knowing? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, do you want to hear my take on that?
Go ahead.
So it was outlawed in 1937, right? There were 3 people that lobbied for that. Henry Anslinger, who was
the first drug czar.
Yep, trying to make a name for himself, big ego, super frickin' like right-wing religious fundamentalist, hardcore dude. Then William Randolph Hearst, who ran a bunch of newspapers, and he owned a bunch of forest, right? And his dream was to be able to make his newspapers out of his trees. And then the other culprit, or should I say, member of this conspiracy, was DuPont, the DuPont family. Now, in 1937, the DuPont family invented nylon, which directly competed with hemp. In a number of ways, nylon is superior. Like for a backpacking tent, you can now have a backpacking tent that you can go snow camping with, or you can camp on the side of a cliff when you're rock climbing. Those crazy suspension tents, and those things weigh like 2.5 pounds. 2.5 pounds, nothing, right? If it was hemp, it would weigh like 5.5 pounds, and that's, it's prohibitive. So, but for a lot of things, hemp was far superior, and nylon is a petroleum-based product. So hemp is completely green, carbon negative, and nylon is carbon intensive. So there's that. And then there's the fact that DuPont invented the chemical process to turn wood pulp into paper.
Oh, wow.
Yep, that same year. So all of a sudden, William Randolph Hearst could cut down all of his forest and turn that into fucking newspapers. And he wouldn't have to buy, before that, 90% of paper and linens were all hemp. So your bed sheets, Levi's were made out of hemp. Your towel, your drapes, your carpet, all of that, the Bible, books, writing paper, all made out of hemp. And the beauty of that is you could take your hemp bed sheet, and when that wore out, you could recycle it and make a shirt out of it, or a pair of pants, or it doesn't go in the garbage. It doesn't go in landfill with paper, right? So imagine the not only the saved energy, but mostly the saved energy, I guess. Imagine that if you could just my jeans wore out. I'm going to bring them to the hemp recycling plant and they'll make it into a shirt, right? Or a new pair of jeans.
Ingenious.
Right? But somehow we got duped by those 3 people to think that hemp was marijuana. Marijuana was hemp. There's no difference. And in reality, they're like distant cousins. They're the same family, but different species, right? So it's like a pit bull and a fucking French poodle. Or yeah, exactly. They're both dogs, but holy fuck, they're not even close, right? So one gets you high, one won't get you high if you smoke it till you're blue in the face. But they smeared that from 1937 till just recently. It's unbelievable the effectiveness of that smear campaign. And then other companies and industries come in and want to benefit from that smear campaign. So say The tobacco industry, right? Because if you're smoking pot, well, you'll probably smoke less cigarettes. We don't want that. Alcohol industry. Oh shit, you're smoking pot. You might not drink as much. Shit, we don't want that. Pharmaceutical industry.
Was that their thinking?
Yeah.
Because that, as it turns out, that doesn't seem like that doesn't seem like it makes any
Well,
sense
guess
now.
what?
Because in my experience, it certainly isn't. That's certainly not it.
Guess what? In Colorado, these numbers panned out to be true.
Really?
Pharmaceutical overdoses went down by 20%.
Really?
Prescription refills went down by 20%. Domestic abuse calls to the police went down by like 10%. Drunk driving arrests went down by like 5%. So like across the board, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here. Ben and Jerry's sales went up by like 25%.
Yes. The Skittles company made out like
Yeah,
bandits.
right?
Potato chip sales went through the
Right.
roof.
And here 20 years prior to that, Tony, we're kicking down people's door for this victimless crime, confiscating their cars and shit. Like, really?
Well, the waste of resources and manpower and just flooding our courts with things that just proved to be not that big a deal. I mean, even my friend Jason, after a while, was in law enforcement, and at first he was like, if it's a crime, you got to come down on them. It's illegal. And then even after a while, he was like, who cares? People smoke pot.
Right, because he sees, oh, they might run a stop sign or something, but they're not the people that are going to knife somebody. They're not going to be
Right.
hit. I'm not going to be called to a domestic dispute call at their house that night for sure. Right? Like they're going to be high watching a movie.
Well, I mean, it's just clearly I've been binge watching Breaking Bad, the show about the Walter White and
Yeah.
his cooks meth, right? And yeah, there's a little difference between people that do a lot of meth as opposed to people that smoke a lot of pot. It's just not the
Pretty big
same,
difference. It's like
Yeah,
a chasm, like the Grand Canyon
yeah.
between
They're
those
they're
two.
not they're not the people, Dave, that are going to go beat you over the head so they can get money so they can get
No.
weed. That just doesn't,
Well, but nowadays, if it's fucking 5 pounds or more, people do that now.
Well, when it comes to for money and profit, Dave, people will kill you for your tennis shoes.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah,
Remember, if you're Air Jordan, people will kill you for
I
Air
do.
Jordans. But just the typical person that's smokes pot every day isn't really a major threat to society. People that are on speed all day, I mean, they go into what they call psychotic episodes, Dave.
Yeah.
I mean, would you rather have somebody living next door that was growing some plants and smoking pot, or cooking meth and smoking a lot of crank?
I would.
Which one would you
I
rather
wouldn't want
have?
either one because somebody might come with guns blazing to their house either way.
True, that's a very good point, Dave. But basically, the major threat isn't the guy that's smoking a joint.
No. The guy that's smoking a joint is harmless. The guy with 25 plants in his backyard.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh,
You got a point.
oh
That's a good
shit!
point.
Now you've got. If he's a good gardener, that's 50 pounds of weed, Tony. That's
Yeah,
fifty. That's
serious
50
money.
to maybe even more. So that's 50 to $100,000 right there. If you have like a distribution network, right? So if you're a gang,
But Dave, the point is taken, right? I mean, it's just
well,
to make marijuana illegal and to put them in the category of these other drugs is silly, and it's been proven to be
and
silly.
I'm agreeing with you, and I want to draw this to a couple real world examples that I have right here in Santa Rosa. And what I'm exacerbating with this is that we need to legalize it and make it just common, like make it like lettuce, so that people don't get killed over this shit. right? So what
Right.
happened here in Santa Rosa 2 years ago? This gang was looking over Google Earth, looking around Sonoma County on Google Earth, right? Sonoma County is notorious for growing weed. They found this guy's yard with these, just covered in pot plants. So they drove all the way from the East Coast. 5 gang members from the Crips drove all the way to Santa Rosa from like New Jersey and New York and North Carolina. One of them was from North Carolina. 5 of them go to this guy's house, all with guns, kick his door in. Actually, there were 2. So the first one, the guy fired back and ended up killed. He got in a shootout with him. He grabbed a rifle and started shooting back. So they killed him, searched the house. There was no weed. There was no money. They were old pictures, and it turned out the guy had leased his yard to a grower, like the year before. So somebody grew pot in the guy's yard. The plants and the money were never at the guy's house. The guy harvested his weed and was long gone. This poor guy that rented his yard out to somebody ends up murdered in his own house from a gang from the East Coast. Then they went to his neighbor's house because they're like, well, fuck, we're not leaving without something. This guy did have weed. They duct taped him to a chair and tortured him because they thought he had a bunch of money, but he didn't. He just had I think it was the same thing, even that it was somebody else's weed in his yard, and he didn't have a stash of money anywhere, and they kept torturing him, and then eventually they just left and went on, and then they caught 4 of them, but they never caught the one chick. She got away. And then there's another case. My mom lives in a senior housing complex here in Santa Rosa. Across the street from her is a gang house. And somebody went to the front door, knocked on the door with a gun. And the guy looked out the side window, saw a guy at his front door with a gun, and just opened up fire. So all of a sudden there's, shootout. And there was 3 guys at the front door. He shot 2 of them, killed one, injured another one, but 2 of them ran all the way back, got in the car. The injured one died in the parking lot of Kaiser, where they got in a shootout with the cops again, or where they got in a shootout with the cops. And craziness.
Freaking wild.
And that's
West.
over weed, dude. But because the dollar amount, right? So when shit gets so crazy, imagine if there was no food in the grocery stores, Tony.
Oh, damn! People will kill each other over toilet paper.
It's true, right?
I mean, when things get scarce, people
get weird, buddy. People get weird. We can be wonderful, loving creatures, right? We could be so generous. There's so much beauty about humanity, right? But fuck, we have a dark side.
Yeah, and especially, when resources get scarce, Dave. I mean, when it comes right down to it, that slogan, that saying, every man for himself, that's the way it is.
You read my mind. It doesn't take much for us to think other. You're other. You're not my spouse. You're not my family. You're other. You're outside. You're cut off. You're the enemy. Right? It's easy for us to go there. Our fucking tribalness is so close as far as evolution goes, right? It's not that long ago that we really relied on our tribe, a little group of families. And those other families over there, they were fucking trying to take our shit.
Yeah, and a lot of times they were.
Yeah. Literally. Because somebody's got better farming land, or somebody's got something. Fuck, dude, somebody just tried to steal my car the other night. You kidding? They,
Oh, people will
yeah,
steal
some
anything, Dave.
motherfucker. I left my truck unlocked. I go out. Somebody had taken apart the whole column on the ignition and was about to hotwire it. Motherfucker.
I literally, David, had pennies stolen from my center console and old tennis balls that had been used, and I was saving them because you and I, back in those days, were playing tennis baseball, playing wall ball. And remember how many tennis balls we would go through when you were playing those games, and somebody took
Wow.
those. They broke into my car and took that. I'm thinking to myself, you've got to be kidding me. So you literally got the change in my center console, which amounted to, I don't know, $1.50, and old tennis balls that are worth nothing.
Now that's a
You
crackhead.
couldn't sell them. What are you
That's a
doing?
crackhead for you, right? Like what you stole has no resale value. Do you understand that? Like
I'm like,
everything
wow.
you just did was for nothing. Somebody broke into Rick Bushner's. Rick Bushner, good buddy. Fix it tricky is what we call him, right? Because you ever need anything
Yeah.
fixed, you ask fucking Rick. Oh, all you do is blah, 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 blah. Tell you how to fix or build anything. But anyway, Tricky Bush Dick had somebody break in at this time. We were in our 20s or something, right? So like we're just young punks trying to make a living in the city, San Francisco. He has an Aries K car station wagon with a stock AM radio, a pair of used tennis shoes because he played tennis, and a fan. Somebody broke his window to break in, stole the used tennis shoes, the fan, and pried the fucking AM radio out of his dashboard. Like, dude, nobody's going to give you a crack rock for a fucking AM radio from an Aries K car station wagon. I'm sorry. Like, what are you thinking?
Criminal mastermind.
Exactly.
At work,
And
obviously.
that in itself is proof of how speed destroys minds. Like, dude, you're spending all this time and energy. No, nobody's going to give you anything. They're just going to look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah. But when you're spun out of your head like that, Dave, things make sense that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Reality's not reality anymore. I mean, how about the whole aspect, the whole thing of taking things apart when they're called, what do they call that?
Tweaker, yeah. The tweaker,
airman. Tweaking, and you're like, gee, I got to take apart.
I wonder how
radio.
a microwave works. But then it never gets put back together. Right.
And just how about the unnaturalness, Dave, of the kind of drug that tells you don't need food, water, sex, you don't sleep. What good
the best
that?
Things in life, food, sex, and sleep? Like, nah, I don't need that shit. Nah, I'm good. I'm totally good. I'm just going to be over here like taking apart 5 stereos, but not putting them back together.
I mean, I think Robin Williams has a really good bit about being on too much coke.
Oh.
Right? Doesn't he have that famous bit about being on too much coke?
He's got a famous bit about everything.
It makes me paranoid and impotent. Paranoid and impotent, and I got to have more
and
of
I
that.
can't get enough.
What?
Yeah, this is the worst shit in the world, but fuck, give me more of that. It's the only thing in the world that lab rats will push a button to get dispensed over sex, food, or maybe just those two. What?
Being with other. I've seen it with monkeys.
Right, and they'll do it. I think they've done it with all these different animals, and they'll not only will they choose it over all that other shit, but they'll do it repeatedly until they have a heart attack and die.
Yeah,
like more. Whoops!
Yeah,
oh fuck! Whoops!
The power of addiction. One's too many and 100's not
Yeah.
enough.
Oh man, you know what I thought you said for a second is the hour of addiction, because that's all it would take for you to kill yourself if you had an unlimited supply, right? Like here you go. 1 hour of addiction, one less junkie.
Well, and also too, Dave, it's, for different people, it affects them in different ways. I mean, some people, they take a drink, Dave, and they just won't drink again until whenever. Other people take a drink and, shortly after, somewhere down the road, now they're alcoholics.
Well, it doesn't happen like that. The alcoholism can happen. Like anybody can become an alcoholism, right? An alcoholic. It can be genetic, but it can also be created, is what I was trying to say. So if anybody drinks every day for a month, you're going to be an alcoholic, right?
But why? But what facilitates the desire?
Well, it's a mental situation, and it's a psychological issue, is what it is. It's so it's different issues for different people. But what I've learned about it, because I've studied it, is that it usually relates to past trauma. So it's a seeking for numbing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
escapism.
Exactly. And when it gets really bad, you escape for 5 minutes, but then you let shit slide in your life that comes back like a tidal wave. Like, oh fuck, I didn't pay my credit card. Whoops, I missed rent. Didn't show up to work. Whatever, right? Like, oh fuck.
And then you're more depressed. And you want to drink more.
Right. But now it's causing problems, right? Because like, oh, fuck, I drank so much I didn't show up to work. Oh shit! Now that makes it hard to pay rent. Ooh, fuck. Right.
Yeah.
But why don't we look at drug addiction like we do alcoholism, right? Because alcoholism is so widely accepted, right? Liquor store in every corner, pretty much. There's booze at the grocery store. There's bars everywhere.
Well, and alcohol into every culture, Dave. Irish.
And there's drugs in every culture too, though. But
I mean, as far as an acceptable thing, I mean, big Italian dinners, Dave. Well,
a bunch of bottles of wine. Yeah. But take that substance.
Irish whiskey is you go down to the pub and have a pint with your buddies, and you have a good shot of good old Irish
whiskey. But you take that substance and substitute it for something else, and all of a sudden now it's taboo, right? And isn't that weird? Because it's, booze, like hard alcohol especially, like it takes a lot of creation. But like pot, we're just talking about, you just pick it out of the ground. Opium, it just grows like that. You just scrape it right off the thing. Like you don't have to do anything to it, and it fucks you up. Right? Alcohol, you got to do all this shit to it. You got to make it. It's good. The temperature's got to be right. But it's so.
But there is the thing with alcohol too, though, Dave, where you can use alcohol, general use of alcohol, but without ever having the idea of getting drunk. Just you have a glass of wine with dinner. You drink it. You sip a little bit of this, and it's just, this tastes good. I never, with Coke and pot, I never use them to not get high. Never once. My main purpose was to get high.
I don't think there's many people that drink alcohol that just have a glass of wine at dinner. I think most of those people probably had a couple drinks before dinner. They might have a mixed drink after dinner.
But I can remember my mom with some of her friends, they would go out or have, some kind of celebration or whatever, Dave, and nobody was getting drunk. It just wasn't, a sloppy drunk mess. It was, I had a beer or two at this gathering. It's like, I'm not drunk.
Well,
I enjoy this wine or taste this liqueur is good. It goes with this.
Sloppy drunk, and having a good buzz on Two totally different things, right?
Because my mom was always talking about, well, the idea of drinking is to drink and not get drunk. I'm like, no, it's for me growing up, that wasn't it. Why did we go
To
get
get
beer?
hammered.
We didn't get one beer. We drank beer to get hammered. When I hear her say this, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, well, and then you see just culturally, you know, there's a lot of people that drink that, won't get drunk. I mean, my grandpa and he owned a bar and he was really into beer and wines and stuff like that. I never saw the guy stumble or stutter
Yeah.
once. I think he drank every
Well, and
day.
see that there's that, right?
Call it nectar of the gods. He used to call it nectar of the
Oh
gods.
yeah, I've heard that and I've used that before. I'm having a beer right now,
Yeah.
but here you go. Click. But but I think it's just funny the way society and culture looks at those things, right? Because if you want to go back thousands of years, psychedelics were revered, right? Like really,
Right.
really like high up there in society. And now it's once again one of those things of perspective and shaming, right? Like, oh, like people, just society in general just looks down upon that, upon like exploring your, what do they call it? Your consciousness. And pretty fascinating
Yeah.
stuff.
I mean, I guess because they'll demonize these things, Dave, and like so many things, there is a grain of truth in there. There is some truth in this, but then people, for their own reasons, will say that, see how bad this is. This is totally unacceptable. We can't have this. We should demonize it. We should penalize it. When in reality, a lot of people will use these substances and never become addicted to it, and will just at some point stop. I'm one of them. Just
Yeah.
stop.
Well, what's amazing, Tony, is speaking of psychedelics, nobody's ever gotten addicted to psychedelics. As a matter of fact,
I've never heard that anybody did. I never heard that there was any withdrawal symptoms or
and just kind of the
anything like
way
that.
they work, speaking from personal experience, you don't want to take them too frequently because it's taxing, right? You're like, wow, that was intense. I need time to recover and get back to square one and get my feet on the ground. And whew, that was a lot, right? So you wouldn't want to do it the next day, and if you do, you might do that a few times as a young person and then be like, "Whoa, that was okay. Whew, been there, done that. Don't need to do that anymore."
Yeah,
but there's these profound things that you can learn, and what's fascinating now, Tony, is there's a whole resurgence in LSD in Silicon Valley. And what these programmers are doing is they're doing what's called microdosing. So they'll take one hit of acid, which is like about 100 micrograms, and they'll cut that in 10 pieces. And they'll take one piece every day. But it's such a small amount that you don't even feel it. But what it does, they've now thanks to technology, you can see the brain activity when they put these little electrodes all over this person's head, and then they feed them acid, and they study what the brain is doing. All these different areas of the brain are communicating with each other, which don't ordinarily communicate. And it's kind of counterintuitive. It goes all the way right back to like Jimi Hendrix talking about like, tasting color and feeling sound. Those two areas of your brain are literally communicating with each other. the visual and the auditory are communicating with each other, where they're normally hardwired apart. And what they've also found is that it forms neurogenesis, meaning it creates new brain cells and the possibility for new brain connections. So if you've had a brain injury that injured a certain part of your brain, through psychedelics, your brain can regrow the connection in a different mechanism. It'll utilize a different part of the brain to achieve the same end result. So vision, hearing, thought processing. Isn't that fascinating?
That is really interesting.
They're talking about.
Hope they keep studying this stuff and come up with cures for a lot of things.
They're talking about this might be the cure for Alzheimer's, Tony.
Yeah.
Because of neurogenesis. So these certain nerves are neuro tissues are dying, but if you can grow new ones to replace them, boom.
Yeah, wouldn't that be wonderful?
They're actually showing really good results. I watched a podcast today. Paul Stamets, the mushroom guru, he's amazing. He's done so much research. He's actually worked with the military. He's developed a pesticide using mushrooms where pests eat this mushroom-based pesticide that's all natural, and then mushrooms grow within the ants. And so like that's what kills them is a mushroom grows within them, and then they just turn into food for that mushroom, and then boom, a mushroom grows. So there's nothing toxic. Pretty fascinating. But he also says that mushrooms are the oldest thing on planet Earth, and that they were the first, that they allowed proteins to develop. So his theory is that mushrooms arrived here on an asteroid because they don't have anything similar in common with other shit on Earth. So apparently they came from an asteroid. They have the power to break up rock, which created rock dust, which then released the minerals into the hard-packed, compact volcanic earth crust at that time and created topsoil and allowed for the establishment of topsoil and growth and photosynthesis as we know it. So pretty fascinating. And what helps plants grow more than the nutrients they receive is this stuff called mitochondrial fiber.
That's
it's
DNA.
DNA under the soil that connects. Mycorrhizal. I'm sorry, mycorrhizal, but it's basically the same thing. So this mycorrhizal fiber grows like a web underneath the soil, and it interconnects all the plants. And what they've been able to study is that it decides how much nutrients a plant needs, and it's transferred to those plants. It's a communication network. I mean, this is mind-blowing stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was discovered the same year, I believe, that they discovered the largest organism on Earth was a 2 square mile patch of this mycorrhizal mushroom fungi. It's basically the roots. The mushroom is just the fruit, right? So the plant is living below the surface and spreading below the surface. So the largest organism on Earth is a 2 square mile mushroom patch in Oregon. And that's where they started doing this research. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Fascinating. And then have you heard about the Stoned Ape Theory?
Nope.
So this theory is that psychoactive mushrooms helped us develop our larger brain. over tens of thousands of years. Because and this is based on partially on writings and partially on cave drawings. Like the oldest known cave drawings are like these crazy psychedelic looking creatures that are like, looks like an aardvark with a bee face and a human body. Right. And it's got little mushrooms popping off of all of its arms and shoulders. You're like, what the fuck? Like, how high were you? It pretty freaking high, apparently. But that's like the first cave art. These fucking people were high as fuck, and not just doing art for anything, but like this, pay attention. This is the shit. You guys need this, right? And if you think about it, every culture like has shamans and like we were saying, now we vilify these people, but we're in a crazy time right now, Tony, where Oakland, California just passed a law where they're allowing these ayahuasca ceremonies to take place now. And ayahuasca is this crazy psychedelic that's made from plants in the Peruvian rainforest. It only grows in a certain area, mostly in Peru, in the rainforest. I don't know. It grows in the rainforest. It might be everywhere. But these native shaman in Peru make this shit. And it's two plants out of hundreds of thousands in the rainforest, right? So how the fuck did you know? So they asked the shaman, like, well, how the fuck do you know which plants and what ratio? And like, he's like, oh, the plants told me. Okay. And now,
well, I mean, I guess trial and error, right? I mean, you use certain things and you go, oh my God, this one got me really high. And the other one just
and that one killed Bob. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, Bob's dead. Oh, let's not drink that one.
Yeah, right. Like certain mushrooms you eat, they taste good. Certain mushrooms get you high, and certain ones
these
kill
shaman,
you.
Tony, straight up said the plants spoke to us, because it's two plants that have to be mixed together and then boiled for 20 hours. So it's not like a mushroom where you just pick it. No, you got to mix these two different things, because the psychoactive one, our body has an antibody for it, right? So you have to mix another plant with it that counters our body's antibody. So it allows you to feel it. Otherwise, our body rejects it as poison.
Yeah, and how they just, again, like you just keep going and doing it, and you come up with whatever combination.
And then all of a sudden you come up with a dosage and like, yeah, take this much. Okay. Alrighty then. And now it's like a yuppie thing now. You can pay to go to Peru and go to a resort where you do yoga and meditation, and then you trip balls for 12 hours with a shaman in a room with a bunch of other people, and you're puking and shitting. Some people shit themselves too. It's that hard, it's that intense, Tony. So your body, you're puking and shitting, and then all of a sudden you're just covered in puke and shit and tripping fucking balls, like for 12 hours straight. And nobody says it's fun. Nobody has ever said like, oh man, I had a great time. What they say is I learned a lot, right? Apparently, if you get high enough, everybody has the same experience, where this female serpent creature entity might basically tells you where you've been fucking up in life and what you need to change.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like a tough love session. Whoa, what's that noise?
Oh, it's my niece is getting some ice. Yeah, boy, isn't that funny how loud that is?
Yeah, it's funny. Now I know what you're talking about when I'm doing dishes, when I'm talking to you or something.
Oh, clang, 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 clang.
So isn't that wild? It's like, you know, people self, voluntarily going into a situation where you're going to puke and shit yourself and be told how you're a piece of shit and what you need to do different. And people sign up for this and pay thousands of dollars to, you know, but it's fascinating.
Wow.
It's fascinating because of how the stories are so similar of when people describe what they experience. It's so similar. It's fascinating.
Well, I mean, this is where all our new medicines and things are going to come from.
I think so. I think so. Um, I think we at least need to have an open mind to it. I mean, if you're studying the human mind, wouldn't you want to study everything that affects the human mind and how it affects it?
Seems reasonable,
right? Like we're pumping kids full of fucking drugs at earlier and earlier ages now. We got all these kids going psycho and shooting up a bunch of places, right? Wouldn't you want to think we might want to look at a different approach?
Well, if it doesn't work, you got to look for another way.
If it ain't broke and Bobby just shot up the mall, or or if it ain't working and Bobby just shut up the mall, you might want to fix it.
Well, there's the trial and error.
Right. So, but yeah, it's fascinating. Like, I don't, you might want to do some YouTube research on that, or if you want, I can forward you some stuff. But there's some fascinating stuff about the viewing the human brain on psilocybin and LSD, and also on microdosing, and how you can trigger the interaction of the brain without feeling the psychoactive effects, right? So people have figured out if you take a tiny amount, the same brain, you'll still fire up the same areas of the brain, but you won't be high.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, fascinating. And we're just getting started. Like, I think there's a state that got permitted to study psilocybin now. So that's,
yeah, it's funny. Why would it be prevented in the first place?
well, the only thing I can think of is mind control, because you don't want, and that goes back to a podcast I did on don't trust the government. So the funniest fact I think I've ever learned is that our government was trying to do this program, MK Ultra. The CIA was trying to do this MK Ultra program, and their ultimate goal was to be able to create a Manchurian candidate, right? Like a zombie assassin or something, right? And who knows? They might have succeeded with Sirhan, because he says he has no memory. But anyway, that program is totally documented through history. But one of the funny things I learned doing the research for that podcast was that this guy, Sidney Gottlieb, he had carte blanche to run a black ops program to study mind control. He bought the entire world supply of LSD and brought it back to the US with the goal of using it to brainwash people. And it pretty much had the opposite effect. And anybody that took it is like, fuck the man, down with the man. Like, and I think that's pretty much what started the 60s is like, the government was using this and testing this on all these people, hoping to get to create like zombies and like, whatever, mind control people. And they ruined a bunch of lives doing it. So I'm not laughing. It's a horrible program. But the end result is that they created these people like Timothy Leary and Ken Kesey that went around the country giving people acid, like talking about how great it was. And, you know, and then all of a sudden we got the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and the Summer of Love. So it totally backfired on them. It went from the goal of mind control to the Summer of Love.
For mind expansion.
Yeah.
But with that, David, I something's going on with my brain right now, and that's sleep.
Right on, buddy. Well, I think we knocked it out of the park once again. Love you, buddy. This has been Tony Schultz with Dave Smith and Another Thing, keeping it real and meandering in real time.
See you next time, Dave.
This has been another conversation with Tony on And Another Thing with Dave. Thanks for tuning in. And please do feel free to check us out on other platforms. We're now available, I'm happy to say, we're available on 8 different platforms, including Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Spotify, and many more. So if we're not available on your favorite platform, please do request it. Please also check me out on YouTube, Instagram, and on Facebook. And Another Thing with Dave. Peace out. Keep fighting.